My parents pressured me to shed pounds for my brother's wedding, but after my transformation, they struggled to cope with my newfound success. Growing up, I was always the heavier child, larger than most of my classmates in kindergarten. While my peers were still discovering what made them unique, my size had already set me apart. As I matured, the weight I carried became increasingly apparent. By high school, I was undeniably overweight, and my shape served as a constant reminder of my differences. College was not much better. While some of my peers began to explore their identities, I remained stuck in the same role, overweight and occasionally battling with it. Being the bigger kid was not easy. It exposed me to relentless ridicule, mockery, and hurtful comments from those who didn't know or care to understand me. I was bullied more than I could count, with classmates teasing me mercilessly. Their insults gnawed at me, creating deep-seated doubts and insecurities that felt insurmountable. They would hurl names and cruel jokes, and I often found myself as the punchline. I was consistently singled out, as if I were somehow unworthy of affection or companionship. I was perpetually excluded from games, parties, and gatherings, always on the outside looking in as others navigated the typical ups and downs of childhood and adolescence. These years of bullying shaped how I viewed myself and interacted with the world. Feeling out of place, I sought refuge in books, losing myself in literature and stories that provided an escape from my daily struggles. Books didn't judge me, they didn't ridicule me. I became known as the nerd, a label I didn't particularly embrace. My younger brother, Jake, was very different from me. Just a year younger, he possessed a natural charisma that drew others in. Jake thrived in social situations, while I was shy and reserved. He had a captivating personality, able to walk into a room and instantly make everyone smile and laugh. Jake didn't just make friends easily, he seemed to have an innate ability to charm people into supporting him, as if he were the sun around which everyone revolved. Despite our differences, I adored him and took my role as his older sibling seriously, feeling fiercely protective whenever he needed it. When he started attending the same high school as me, I was initially thrilled. Being Jake's older sister filled me with pride, as if I had a special place in his life. However, as he settled into high school and began to carve out his own identity, I noticed a shift in how he viewed me. He started to recognize our differences and how we were treated differently. While I was the quiet, bookish type, he was vivacious and popular, quickly establishing himself among the cool crowd. I watched as he became aware of my quirks and insecurities, which had previously made me seem uncool. Jake began to distance himself from me as he found new friends, actively ignoring or avoiding me at school. That hurt deeply. It genuinely pained me that my own brother saw me as inferior. Still, I tried to accept his decision and give him the space he seemed to need, even though it felt like I was losing not just my brother but also a friend. Gradually, Jake stopped ignoring me and began to associate with others who made me feel like an outcast. He and his friends would seize any opportunity to humiliate me whenever we crossed paths in the hallways or at lunch. They would taunt me in front of other students or, worse, try to trip me as I walked by with my lunch tray, all for a laugh. It felt like I was losing him not to new friends but to the same taunting and abusive behavior I had endured for so long. I was always on guard, trying to avoid not just the criticism from my peers but also the humiliation inflicted by my own brother. It hurt immensely, especially because it came from someone I had always admired and looked up to. When Jake invited his friends over, they would all gang up on me at home. They would burst into my room without knocking, laughing, and pointing at my body. They hurled insults like geek and fatty at me as if they were nothing. I felt like a zoo animal, their source of entertainment. In my own room, I felt small and alone, as if I were an outsider in my own home. I tried to explain my feelings to my parents multiple times, hoping they would understand how difficult it was for me to cope with Jake's behavior. But every time I brought it up, they dismissed my concerns. They would smile and defend his actions, claiming that this was just how siblings bonded, that Jake was only playing around with me. They insisted it was harmless, even suggesting that I should lighten up and stop taking their teasing so seriously. They told me I was older and should be more patient and resilient. So, not only did I endure years of bullying from my peers, including my own brother, but my morning to find my meticulously completed work missing. Panic would set in, and I would frantically search through my books, papers, and files, growing more anxious with each passing minute. And there she would be, smirking at me from the doorway, relishing every moment of my distress. To her, it was a small victory, a way to knock me down a peg and remind me that I wasn't invincible. She understood how crucial my grades were to me, how much of my self-worth I had tied to them, and she took pleasure in disrupting that aspect of my life. I only discovered the truth about her stealing my assignments years later when she drunkenly confessed one evening. My relationship with Jake has softened over time, but we are still far from close. You could say we've matured a bit, and some of the animosity from our youth has faded. However, the strong bond that siblings often share never fully developed between us. After graduation, I moved out and started a new life in a different city, with an exciting job and new opportunities, which meant I didn't see my family as often. As time passed, our communication dwindled to occasional phone calls or texts. So, when I planned a summer visit home last year, I was genuinely excited to see everyone. It had been a long time since we had all gathered as a family, and I looked forward to catching up and reconnecting. However, not everything went as I had hoped. Our family lunch started off well enough, everyone seemed delighted to see me, and for a moment, it felt like old times. That changed abruptly when Jake unexpectedly announced his engagement. None of us saw it coming, and we initially thought he was joking. But it quickly became clear that he was serious. He proudly extended his hand, showcasing a stunning ring, and I couldn't help but comment on how exquisite it was. I was genuinely happy for him, thrilled that he had finally found someone he loved who loved him back. Almost as soon as the congratulations faded, Jake turned to me and asked about my recent activities. I shared details about my career, my life, and how rewarding things had been for me. Before I could finish, he interrupted me, smirking, "But why are you still overweight? If your life is so amazing, shouldn't you have lost some weight by now?" His remarks hit me like a slap, reigniting old insecurities I thought I had overcome. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, and I could feel everyone's gaze on me, waiting to see how I would react. I merely shrugged and attempted to laugh awkwardly at his comment, but my parents quickly joined in to criticize me. They began discussing how I was still overweight and unmarried, expressing concern that I might never have children. I felt utterly mortified hearing them talk like that. My accomplishments, the work I was proud of, the life I had built for myself in another city, seemed to matter little to them. They were solely focused on my weight and the fact that I didn't have my own family. As my parents continued to talk about me, their comments cut deeper than I had anticipated. I had spent years gradually discovering myself, gaining confidence and freedom, but in those moments, I felt like the same anxious, awkward teenager I had always been, desperate for my family's acceptance and approval. My parents then praised Jake for getting engaged before me, expressing their pride in him. To them, I was the inferior child, successful but not quite enough. What was supposed to be a joyful family reunion quickly turned into a painful reminder of old wounds. At that point, I felt more like an outsider than ever. Jake didn't stop there, he continued to ask probing questions. "So, when are you getting married? Do you even have a boyfriend?" He was blatantly mocking me in front of everyone by bringing up my romantic life. My parents soon joined the conversation, agreeing with Jake that it was high time for me to find someone before it was too late. They pointed out how Jake, being younger, was settling down before me while I, the older sibling, was wasting my life away at work. I attempted to argue that I liked my life the way it was, that my work and freedom provided me with fulfillment. My career paid well, and I was passionate about it, so why did I need to meet a spouse or have a child to be happy? "I'm content just the way I am," I told them, but my words didn't seem to register. My mother, in particular, looked at me with disdain. She shot me a sharp look and taunted, "What's the point of earning all that money if you don't have anyone to come home to?" It was as if she couldn't fathom that happiness could exist outside of marriage or family. Sitting there, I felt the familiar sting of being misunderstood, as if my life choices were being dismissed. This was my family, and they were supposed to lose weight and present myself better for her wedding. They suggested that if I shed some pounds, it would be easier for me to attract a partner. Jake enthusiastically chimed in, "Yeah, I want you to lose a few pounds at least," he remarked nonchalantly, as if he were doing me a favor. I sat there, astonished and humiliated, feeling an ache I hadn't experienced in years. How could my family speak to me like this? Did I truly deserve their hurtful words simply because I was overweight? Was I not allowed to have feelings because of my size? I was a normal person, just like them. I functioned like everyone else. I had never considered my weight an obstacle, so why did they? I had even dated men who appreciated me just as I was, but my parents and Jake made it sound like my weight was a barrier to finding love, which wasn't true. I wanted to defend myself and tell them how hurtful their comments were, but I felt frozen, unable to articulate the right words. Their remarks transported me back to high school, to the painful times when my weight made me a target. I despised how casually my family brought up my deepest insecurities without considering how they made me feel. So, I sat there, holding in my pain, and let the conversation shift to something else. When I returned home from my trip, I threw myself into losing weight with a zeal I hadn't realized I possessed. It began as a way to prove something to my family, but it gradually became a deeply personal journey. I joined a gym, followed a strict diet, and even hired a personal trainer. My trainer has been a lifesaver, having gone through her own transformation from overweight to healthy. She knew exactly how to guide me on a path tailored specifically for me. She created a routine that aligned with my goals and encouraged me every step of the way, reminding me to be gentle with myself when I stumbled. This time, everything clicked. I started losing weight steadily, and as the pounds came off, I felt lighter, not just physically, but mentally as well. For the first time in my life, I began to feel and look different. My confidence soared. I used to think that losing weight wouldn't have much of an impact, but it has. People see me differently now. Strangers are kinder and more attentive, and friends and colleagues regard me with newfound respect. I can't deny that this feels like validation I've never received before. It's as if I've suddenly become more visible than I was before. My new body brought a fresh sense of style. I overhauled my entire wardrobe, filling it with items I had only dreamed of wearing. I even opted for a complete hair makeover, trying a daring and trendy style that I would have been too afraid to attempt in the past. It may seem extravagant, but I've never felt better. I look in the mirror now and hardly recognize the person staring back. It's like meeting a version of myself I never knew existed. I'm proud of how far I've come, not just because I lost weight, but because I gained confidence and self-assurance. With Jake's wedding just 2 weeks away, my family invited me to fly down and join them for lunch next week to finalize the plans for his special day. However, I don't feel like going home. I don't want my family to ridicule me again or make me feel small, especially now that I'm finally feeling good about myself for the first time in a long time. I don't want to attend Jake's wedding because of how he and my parents have treated me, but I know if I don't go, they'll be furious and give me a long lecture about how family is family and how, no matter how heartbroken I am, I must be present for Jake's big day. So, what happens if I don't attend my brother's wedding? Update 1. Wow, I'm overwhelmed by everyone's response. Some of your suggestions are truly hilarious. I can't believe you're encouraging me to show up and mess with my brother now that I've lost so much weight. Growing up as a heavier kid had a negative impact on my self-esteem, particularly in how I perceived myself. I struggled with self-doubt for a long time, always believing I wasn't good enough or didn't measure up to others. But reading all of your responses has been a game changer. It's as if you've helped me see myself in a completely new light, and I'm finally starting to feel more confident than I ever have. In fact, I'm seriously considering showing up to my family's lunch and shocking them. They haven't seen me in a long time, and since I don't use social media, they have no idea how much weight I've lost. It will be interesting to witness their reactions. Update 2. Okay, Reddit, you're not prepared for this update. Grab some popcorn because they were the ones who had pushed me into it in the first place. Surely, they would be overjoyed to see the positive changes in me and finally recognize the effort I had put in. When I walked into my parents' house, their jaws dropped. They looked at me in disbelief, as if they couldn't fathom that I was the same person. After a moment, they stammered, wondering if it was really me. I gave them a big hug, thrilled with their reaction. They continually complimented my appearance, saying how beautiful I looked and how they couldn't believe it was me. However, when Jake arrived, the atmosphere shifted. He didn't notice me at first, treating me as if I were invisible, just as he had done so many times before. But when I stood up to greet him, he did a double take, his eyes widening in surprise. He let out an odd, almost forced laugh before reaching over and poking my stomach, wide-eyed as if he needed proof that I had truly lost all that weight. My parents laughed at his reaction and explained that they, too, couldn't believe it at first. As we settled in for lunch, the conversation turned to my makeover. Jake and my parents bombarded me with questions about how I had done it, marveling at how different I appeared. Their voices were filled with surprise, as if they had never imagined I could look any other way. Jake, in particular, kept saying that he had never anticipated such a dramatic change. Then he dropped this gem: "When I first asked you to lose weight, I never expected you to look this pretty. I didn't even know you had that jawline and those ankles beneath all that fat." I hesitated, trying to maintain my composure, and smiled at him before reminding him, "Jake, I've always been pretty. Losing weight just enhanced my features." Jake, however, insisted that there was something more about me that was different. Then he had the audacity to ask, "Did you have some surgeries done? Because there's no way you look this good on your own." I could feel my blood starting to boil. The nerve to think I needed surgery to look attractive when I had worked so hard for my current appearance. I looked him directly in the eyes and replied, "Wow, Jake, it's amazing that you think so little of me. No surgery, just a lot of hard work and self-love. Something you might want to try sometime." Jake's expression shifted from surprise to displeasure, but I didn't care. It felt incredible to finally say something and put him in his place. Before he could react, my parents jumped in, attempting to smooth things over in their own way. "You shouldn't be offended," my mother said. "The three of us have just never seen you look this way before. Honestly, you look even more beautiful now than Jake does, and he's the one getting married." Jake appeared angrier after my mom's remark, but I simply ignored him and focused on my food, allowing him to stew in his rage. Then my mother added, "You know, I was thinking maybe you should go back to your original hair color. I think you'd look even better with your natural shade. This blonde look makes you stand out too much. Maybe you should just go back to your old look." Jake and my father quickly agreed with her. My dad chimed in, saying, "Jake has always been the blonde child of the family, and you were the brunette, so it would be a good idea for you to go back to your original hair color. It might make you look more like yourself." Hearing their statements, I was taken aback. I suddenly felt like the three of them were ganging up on me, trying to bring me down. My hairstylist had suggested that I change my hair color to blonde because it better matched my skin tone and complexion. It had nothing to do with trying to outshine or overshadow my brother. I could see why Jake was jealous of me. I looked good now, but I couldn't understand why my parents were so unhappy with me. It was as if they wanted to revert me back to who I was, despite the fact that they had initially wanted me to be more presentable for their darling son's upcoming wedding. But now that I had made those changes, they couldn't accept who I had become. Instead of recognizing my progress, they sought to undermine me. Finally, I questioned my parents, "What's your problem? Why can't I be blonde too? Does my brother own that color or something?" I paused, annoyed. "No, he doesn't. I can be blonde or brunette, it's my choice. Why does it even matter to you so much?" I couldn't understand why they were so fixated on me returning to my former self, as if my appearance had to match who I was before. My mother scoffed at me and claimed,